In lessons 1 through 3, we learned how to compose with independent clauses. But a world with only independent clauses would be pretty boring. With more variety, we can make our sentences more complex, we can add more ideas, and we can create even more relationships between those ideas. One way to do that is by adding dependent clauses. Before we learn how to use them, though, let's first learn how to recognize them. Just like independent clauses, dependent clauses contain a subject and a verb. However, they are different because, as the name suggests, a dependent clause can't stand alone. It depends on, or it must be joined with, an independent clause in the sentence. They also differ from independent clauses because they typically begin with one of two kinds of words that signal the beginning of a dependent clause: subordinating conjunctions, coded in pink, or relative pronouns, coded in red. We've listed a few of these signal words here, but for a more exhaustive list of subordinating conjunctions and relative pronouns, see our handout, The Basics of Syntax Dependent Clauses, linked in the module. For now, let's talk about how these signal words function. Because the term subordinating conjunction sounds so similar to coordinating conjunction, they can easily be confused. To understand the difference between the two, we'll use another metaphor. Let's say we have a power outlet and a cell phone. Think of these as two independent clauses. We can choose to join the cell phone and power outlet with a charger. Think of this as a coordinating conjunction. But if we unplug the charger, both the outlet and the phone will still function properly. Similarly, if we unplug a coordinating conjunction, disconnecting one independent clause from another independent clause, the two clauses can stand on their own and function independently. A subordinating conjunction, however, is more like the power cord on a lamp. We still have a power outlet, the independent clause, and then, attached to the power cord, is a lamp. Think of this as a dependent clause. When the power cord connects the lamp to the power outlet, the lamp turns on. In other words, when the subordinating conjunction connects the dependent clause to the independent clause, our sentence functions. But unlike the cell phone in our previous example, if we unplug the lamp's power cord, it won't turn on. It no longer functions. The lamp depends on the power outlet for electricity, just as a dependent clause depends on the independent clause to function, to be a complete sentence. To understand how our second kind of signal word, the relative pronoun, functions, let's first take a minute to review pronouns. We talked about pronouns earlier when we introduced subjects. We learned that they could be substituted for subject nouns and noun phrases. So, running daily around the lake could be replaced by it. We call pronouns that substitute in for subjects a personal pronoun. Relative pronouns are another type of pronoun that replace nouns or noun phrases in a sentence, but they do more than just act as a substitute for subjects like personal pronouns. Relative pronouns also signal the beginning of a dependent clause. So when running daily around the lake is replaced with which, the reader now knows that the following information cannot stand alone. Compare the two variations of this sentence. The one that begins with which cannot stand alone, but the one that begins with it can. If either type of signal word, subordinating conjunction or relative pronoun, slips past you, another test to determine whether a clause is dependent is the stranger test. For example, imagine that a stranger suddenly came up to you on the street and said, which led to another 5 years of hardship and economic depression. Yes, strangers walking up to us and randomly making statements about economic depression is weird, but even more confusing is the overwhelming need we'd feel for the stranger to tell us more. What led to another 5 years of economic depression? That need for more information, that's your test. If you would need to know more from that stranger, then you know you've only composed a dependent clause. Go ahead, try it out with the rest of the sentences below. In Lesson 4, we learned how to identify dependent clauses, which, like independent clauses, always have a subject and a verb, but must be linked with an independent clause. We also talked about the two kinds of words that signal the beginning of a dependent clause, subordinating conjunctions and relative pronouns. Now is your chance to practice what we learned. Please go to the next page of the module and complete the Identifying Dependent Clause quiz. Follow the instructions to practice what we covered in this lesson, and then move on to the next page of the module for Lesson 5 of the workshop, where we will discuss joining dependent clauses.